It's now time to bring you the part one of our interview segment on the show today. Now, last month, precisely January the 21st, the Central Bank of Nigeria released guidelines for the newly introduced electronic invoicing, which is the e-invoicing, an evaluator for exporters and importers in the country. Since the announcement of this policy direction, the Apex Bank has been under severe knocks. And these have also raised some calls from different quarters urging the CBN to either rescind the policy or extend its implementation timeline. According to the Apex Bank, the new regulation is primarily aimed at achieving accurate value from import and export items in and out of the country, as electronic processes would also replace the hard copy and the invoice authenticated by the authorized dealer banks. For some industry players, the development will enable the Apex Bank to effectively deploy technology to manage the country's resources, while others are of the view that if the implementation of the CBN guideline is allowed, it will bring about duplication, lengthy and cumbersome procedures in the nation's import and export system, especially for those who are not experts on valuation, import and export procedures. Well, joining me now live in our Lagos studio to understand some of the pros, cons, the challenges and prospects ahead of this new policy, I have the Director General of the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, NASIMA, Mr. Ayola Olukone. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's nice to be here.
We've had a whole lot of reactions, mixed reactions, really looking at this policy direction. Some say this is tilting towards policy somersault. We've had the intervention of the House of Reps also calling for a 90-day timeline to get acquainted with this. But for some, they say we should allow for the adjustment to stabilize the economy. Let us take our time. Others say more conversation or talk should have been had before such a policy direction was taken in the first place. What are really your concerns with this policy, and how do we reach a favorable turnaround beyond this initial extension of the date of implementation?
Well, I think first let us acknowledge the efforts of the CBN to deploy IT, in terms of management of the nation's economy and its role as far as the nation's economy is concerned. And I think that was one of the things which, of course, led to the e-policy valuation initiative. But of course, definitely, we can say that this was a policy 5 minutes to midnight, and then the dates in terms of implementation, 1st February was rather too hasty. Too hasty. I don't know if you followed the discussion on it, because immediately it came out because of the reaction, especially from the private sector and all of us, and many of our members too as well. The NEPC, New ED, organized a webinar, an extensive Zoom meeting, which was attended by many stakeholders from different sectors, because it's going to affect every other sector. Various many sectors, practically all sectors of the economy. This was what happened, and hundreds of people, stakeholders, close to about 1,000 attended. And the long and short of it was, this is a policy which is rather too hasty, which still needs more consultation, wide consultation, as far as that is concerned. I think that is the long and short of it. The policy needs to be looked at properly, more consultation across the board.
And for those who think this would likely tilt towards the realm of policy somersault, what's your word as well to that?
Well, I think if you strip out the corporate veil, I think that's something like that. Because sometimes if you go across, I mean, people are even asking questions, is it the CBN that should do this? Look at your narrative.
The fiscal authorities ought to take this up.
Yes. Is it the CBN at all? No. But let us leave that. The long and short of it was in it, let us now begin the process of effective, wide consultation, because it's very key, it's very important, because it's going to have a lot of effect in terms of system-wide as far as the economy itself is concerned.
And this consultation definitely is one of the pillars of growth if we're looking at an economic agenda which is supposed to redefine how business is done in the country, really.
Definitely. And if we cast our mind back to not too long ago, when the whole question of the AFCTA was starting, and then Mr. President was on his way to signing, and of course there was an uproar. And I think, if I remember, You know, Mr. President flight had to be cancelled and rescheduled. And then we started a whole process of consultations on the AFCTA before eventually everybody came on board, and of course, subsequently Nigeria signed, you know, with some things in it. I think this is one of the things which we need to do as far as this policy of service is concerned, because there's very many aspects of it.
Okay.
I mean, look at the question of determining the value. I mean, how do you do that? In terms of the range which they give, the prices of, I mean, a good example is the prices of crude, for example, which swings bust and bust cycle. We're looking at the possibility of the mining sector as one of the areas which we want to also growth. I mean, we want to move from 0.33% to about 4%. How do you do that? I serve as High Commissioner to Australia for my life. You know, I serve as a career ambassador, and I retired as ambassador to Australia before this new assignment. And I'm very, very close to the mining sector. Is one of the areas. So a lot of our members quickly raise the alarm that, look, listen, this question of valuation as far as the CBN service is concerned, how do you determine that? Okay. That's why there is need for more consultation along these lines. Yeah.
Okay, now, but as you said, stripping all of the pros and cons, let's just also look at what the CBN is trying to achieve here in the sense of looking at automating processes. Now, we are looking at a phase where it's not business as usual, where you're having to deal with hard copy and all of those. But with the transition and automation of processes, how do we begin to build infrastructure and processes that is simplified, that would have quick turnaround time for customer complaints and also verification processes? How do we now have a robust base?
I come from the Chambers of Commerce, the National Chambers of Commerce, which is the one that issued the certificate of origin in terms of goods being exported abroad. And I know that we had to also shift at a particular period in terms of e-certified copies. So it is possible to do this as far as that is going to. Indeed, it is an imperative. There is no way we can run away from that. But we have to get it right. We have to get it right in terms of the processes as far as the question of valuation and application of technology. We can't run away. That is our existential reality. Like we said, if the policy is not well thought out, the mechanism is not correct, you will get a result which is counterproductive to what you want to achieve. And that's why we are saying that as far as that is concerned, and then let people know that, look, listen, this is the processes. It will eliminate a lot of problems too as well in terms of application of technology. But at the end of the day, if you do not get it right,
once the foundation is faulty,
you miss the point.
Do you think we're having a chance of silencing the noise that would have a smooth transmission of authenticated invoices, and it wouldn't be fraught with unnecessary bureaucracy? Because that's one of the biggest challenges we also have in doing business today: import-export.
Well, one of the things which we are glad about is the whole question of application of fintech. You know, and I give you a good example because the process will be easier. It will reduce a lot of wasting time. The whole question of documentation, if you know, in those days, in the days of the banks, if I can take you back, in those days we used to go to the bank to take tally number. You take tally number to be served in the bank. Now look at this today. You sit in your comfort of your homes, the comfort of your offices.
And by the click of a button.
Click of a button, you transfer 5 million, 2 million. You don't have to go. So this perhaps is the target. But like we said, we did not get there just
overnight.
Overnight. We had to go through those. And that is why, like I said, I think the NEPC webinar or Zoom meeting was very useful. There are a lot of suggestions from that meeting. I also participated, and I think the CBN as well as the NEPC and all of that, maybe perhaps we should look at the report and the reaction from that meeting to be able to take a lead on which direction should we go as far as this is concerned.
In the plot, as we're waiting for a new date for the implementation of this policy, what will be some of the disappointing elements I think might come up while we are waiting in terms of conversations, whether or not they are tilting towards the right direction? This is a waiting period. We cannot say for certain what new date will be provided, but within this waiting period, what do you expect?
Well, within this waiting period, I sincerely hope the CBN and the relevant section and all other stakeholders, Ministry of Finance is going to be involved, the Customs is going to be involved. The consultations that will take place is key and very important. And some of those consultations should take place without the noise. We're talking about hard facts and looking at it. Each area, the question of valuation, the question of the percentage, is it right? Those are the nitty-gritty. You know, like they say, the devil is always in the detail.
In the detail.
And when you want to deal with the detail, I don't think you want to do with that in a noisy environment or outside in which there will be various. That's where we're saying that. And we as the Chambers of Commerce, we are indeed the National Chambers of Commerce, we are indeed very ready to be part of this conversation with the CBN and all other stakeholders as far as that is concerned. And I think we'll
Have you had any reach out so far?
We're reaching out in various areas. I mean, take, for example, during the national press conference by our national president, Ideu Diagbala, he had mentioned the issue broadly in terms of, look, listen, while the goal is good, reaching the goal still require a lot of work. And that's what we will advise, that's what we'll say and suggest to the CBN in terms of the famous question of what's to be done. And what are the issues which should be tackled.
In a pitch of how this should also work, some are also calling for public sensitization in terms of the ports of entry, including seaports, airports, the border stations, and we also saw a call for the governor of the central bank to appear before the committee explaining if whether or not this would affect revenue generation of the Nigeria customs. How do you see this?
Well, first let me say that you're talking about the National Assembly and the committee itself now. This is a democracy. This is not the era of military rule. I think the National Assembly, in terms of calling on the CBN, is doing its own bit as far as the question of their oversight function in the area of competence is concerned. I think it's a good thing. Let us see. We sincerely hope the CBN governor will attend and, of course, explain, because it also provides an opportunity for the CBN to be able to go out to the wider public, because at the end of the day, it's not just for private businesses themselves. At the end of the day, it's going to affect the ordinary people on the streets, because whatever happened in that particular area will be passed on to the people themselves. So I think it's a good process in terms of the National Assembly, the CBN also engaging to explain. And it also provides opportunity for, if you're talking about open hearing, for people to come in and
air their concerns.
And hear their concern. Knowledge is not in the private pocket of anybody, one particular person. Sometimes you do get brilliant ideas from even members of the public, themselves and their respective stakeholders who are concerned.
No situation is cast in stone. How do you see this also affecting revenue generation in the country, especially looking at the customs and other parts to it all?
Well, the bigger the cake, the better for all of us in terms of what we will share. We hope that, of course, properly implemented, it will help in terms of the revenue issue, itself. And I think that is one of the things which we should look at. How can we do that? And which brings to mind, again, the whole question, because it's all interlocked, the whole question of ease of doing business, as well. And we've always been saying that it is very important for us to make sure that the whole question of ease of doing business has practical implementation. And that's why action at the subnational level is key and very important. Because it is key and very important that while at the federal level, at the national level, this initiative is good, but it's also very important to carry companies and all of that, and state at the subnational level along, as well, because there are a lot of companies and businesses who do businesses at that particular level themselves. So it's a very important aspect of it,
Mr. Olekone, I like the fact that you made mention of the ease of doing business in the country at this point in time. Now, for the fact that we know this is the pre-election year, for the first half of the year, it's relatively doing business as usual, and for the second part we are actively preparing for the 2023 general election. How much of a change do you think we can have, this marking the last active year of the President Muhammadu Buhari administration? How much of a change do you see we can have, a turnaround in the economic space? How much of a sound policy direction do you think we can implement within the ticking hours that we have here as we're wrapping up the conversation?
I think it's possible to be able to do something along those lines. I was on television, on the network television a few days ago, I think it was a Monday, to discuss specifically the question of ease of doing business. And I think Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, who happens to be the SSA to the president, was also there, and when we raised the issue. And I cited the example of a Turkish company, which, of course, is into, I will not mention the name so that TVC does not give me a bill, into diapers in Agbara, Ota. In Agbara, in Ota area. And the roads and infrastructure in the place is horrendous. It's a $100 million US investment, diapers and all that. And the company is waiting to put in additional $60 million. But the crisis and the problem of road infrastructure in that place is keeping that company behind. So in context of ease of doing business, that is the issue of infrastructure negatively affecting. I cite that as an example. And then we now say that the question now is, how do we scale over such? Which means the question and issues of infrastructure as we go down the road, especially looking at 2023 down the road. I think this is an area which deserves a lot of attention in terms of the question of our goal towards 2023, and of course to reposition the economy, because at the end of the day, after the election itself, whoever comes in will still have to.
It's not necessarily a clean slate. You still have the backlog of activities.
Yes. So if we can scale, as far as the longer ease of doing business is concerned, we've come a long way. But I also say that we still have a long way to go as far as that is concerned, especially as we eye 2023.
What other markets do you think would also help transform this quest for ease of doing business? Some have described the situation at hand as an unease, that they're just certain quarters enjoying this supposed ease within the economic space.
Let me, in answering your question, let me draw our attention to the survey on ease of doing business, which I'm sure that you also followed. And that at the end of the day, very many of the states fell behind. Even the state of excellence, Lagos State, which is the 5th biggest, largest economy in Africa, discovered that a lot of them did not even, not even 30% in terms of achievement, as far as ease of doing business is concerned. And I remember that some officials from Lagos State also came to us because the governor himself said, look, listen, this is our result. We didn't pass. Please go around to get a feel in terms of what's to be done. Where are we failing? And I think this is what states across the country needs to do in terms of assessing the whole question of the structure as far as ease of doing business.
But on your own scorecard, how would you rate us?
I think we can do better. Let me just say that. We can do better. I for example, serve as ambassador to Australia. And of course, the mining sector was one of the areas of interest for me, in which Nigeria and Australia also had an agreement. And we're looking at the question of the mining sector, its possible contribution from just 0.3% to about 4%, with a target of 27 billion by 2025. But a lot of these mining resources are in the respective state of the federation. How much are the mining states? Your Kogi, your Nasarawa, your Kaduna State, your Osun State, Zamfara State, how much have they risen to the occasion in terms of ensuring and supporting appropriate structure to be able to harness the resources in their respective places? I get information, I get requests from across our missions abroad. To Nasima, please help us. We want to come in maybe to a particular state. As I speak to you, there's a company on ground in Kogi State that will start exporting iron ore from the Agbaja iron ore deposit. The question I ask, because when I ask them, how much is Kogi State into it? The answer to that is that, look, listen, unfortunately, no. So a lot of them needs to come up with special purpose vehicles that will, of course, be able to key into the mining sector. Because the mining sector is a little bit different from the oil sector.
Yes.
And in terms of, it's a long distance race. It's not your dig out, and then you're off. It is necessary for those respective states. You can't put your mining assets and the resources maybe in a department in the Ministry of Commerce and Cooperative Department and expect foreign direct investors to come in. No, you need a special purpose vehicle, maybe a limited liability company, which will encourage them that they respect. So the state will say, this is what I'm putting into this place as a co-investor in this particular area. I think this is how we can nail down the question of the ease of doing business, and then also make sure that the respective state will rise up to the occasion to be able to have a meaningful impact. You know, in my office, we have a very expression to concretize the abstractions as far as this is concerned.
Okay, now lastly, let's just look at how we are also positioning ourselves for the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. The cost of production is high in Nigeria. You've made mention of the infrastructure deficit we have on ground. We have had instances of policies somersaulted. Does not necessarily paint a clear picture. We know what we are doing now. In terms of investors also sitting on the fence, not necessarily looking at Nigeria as the most favorable place to have the investment, irrespective of the size and resource base we have now. How do you think we would fare going down the line with our competition from other smaller competitors who are pulling bigger fronts, take the likes of Ghana and a whole lot more? You can't even compare the resource base, but yet they are making more strides. They have much more investments. What's the future of Nigeria going forward, say for the next 5 years, in terms of how we perform on the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement and consolidating on all of the prospect that should be ordinarily?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say as far as the AFCTA service is concerned, you cannot conceive of an effective FCTA procedures for implementation without Nigeria. You cannot conceive of it. It is the leading economy in Africa. In terms of production capacity, we are way ahead of a large number.
But some would say it's wishful thinking for people to think that we'll still wait for Nigeria to come on board fully.
No, already Nigeria is keyed into it, and I speak as somebody who is closely involved in the discussion and negotiations as far as the AFCTA service is concerned. Let us also understand that the AFCTA is not a 100-meter dash.
Yes,
it's a long distance race.
Yes,
and there are areas where we will have the capacity. There are areas in which we may not be able to compete. That is the reality. But if you look at it currently, areas such as the financial and banking sector, the Nigerian financial banking sector are already implementing the FCTA in the forefront. In terms of, I serve as a diplomat, a career diplomat in Nairobi in Kenya, 2003, 2007, and acting PAM rep, I'm acting High Commissioner to that. There were hardly any Nigerian banks in those days. Fast forward to recent times, we have a lot of our banks who are there and leading. Across the road in Kenya, in Ghana, the Nigerian banks also dominate. In the area of services too as well. And if you look at the creativity sector, you can say Nigeria is out there. So in terms of implementation, in terms of our playing in the AFCT, we have the capacity to, if not in all of the areas, there are specific areas. I'm wearing an adire, you can say bar and say, you can say an ethnic group. I mean, an ethnic fabric.
Yes.
I remember that Ogun State had what they call the authentic Ogun adire. So this is an area.
Well, Mr. Olekale, do you get my drive here? The concerns around transforming the potentials to reality.
That is the challenge. But what I'm saying is that we should look at areas where already now we are competing. And one of the things we need to do is to sensitize and let people understand. And against the background of the report we get, in which I see companies coming to NACIMA to be members of NACIMA as a corporate body, and I ask, they say, we are here to be part of you because we're taking a long view of history as far as the AFCTA itself is concerned. While we are, careful, we have apprehensions as far as productive capacity. Now, as I speak to you, a large number of companies do trade across the West Coast. So trading is starting already, gradually. I'm not minimizing the crisis and the challenges of energy. It's real. I'm not minimizing the crisis and the problem of infrastructure. But it is left for us.
Even insecurity.
Even insecurity. Let me give you a small little anecdote. The African Coffee Organization is planning to hold a big, huge event in here because Nigeria, as far as coffee is concerned, I don't even think we're measuring, but it's an area of strength for us. And a company that produces gourmet coffee now is struggling to meet the local challenges. They are almost sold out in terms of roasted coffee. The culture of young people, their iPad in a coffee bar and things like that. And they want to acquire land somewhere along Ogun State to be able to increase the capacity in terms of coffee beans. And when I went to inspect and they were discussing, They said we are doing so with the intention to compete with the Ethiopian coffee, to compete with the Kenyan coffee and all of that, because the Nigerian coffee is there and of course has the potential to be able to effectively compete within the framework of the FCTA as well. I think that is the way we should think. That is the way we should look at it in terms of the challenges of the FCTA. And like I said, there's no part of Africa you go to where you don't see hear Nigerian music. I remember during the COVID lockdown, Terra Culture, I mean, one of our creative entrepreneurs in the creativity sector, went online. Over 40,000 people logged on.
Nigeria remains the giant of Africa, and we hope, according to some, the sleeping giant wakes up and smells the coffee.
I'm an incredible optimist as far as that is concerned.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. We've been speaking with Mr. Ayola Olukoni, the Director General of the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture. We'll definitely keep our fingers crossed to see how the intricacies will play out in the coming days, and also conversations around this e-invoicing. How will this take off? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for having me. We let the conversation continue.
Thank you.